The doctor said the words at 11:43 on a Tuesday morning. She had been sitting in that chair for 20 minutes before he said them, had sat through the preamble, the careful language, the specific throat-clearing quality of a man who has delivered this kind of news enough times to have developed a method for it, but not enough times to have stopped feeling the weight of it. She had sat through all of that with the composed, unhurried quality of a woman who has learned to receive difficult things without performing a reaction. And when he finally said the words, she received them the same way. She thanked him. She asked 3 specific questions about timeline, about management, about what the months would look like in terms of her capacity to function. He answered each one. She wrote nothing down because she did not need to. She had always had the kind of memory that retained what mattered and discarded what did not, and the 3 answers he gave her mattered in the specific, irreversible way that changes the shape of everything that comes after them. She thanked him again. She picked up her bag and walked out of the consulting room and through the corridor and through the waiting room and out of the hospital and into the specific quality of a Lagos afternoon that was proceeding entirely indifferently to what had just happened inside that building. The sun was where it always was. The traffic was what it always was. A woman was selling water at the gate with the specific, unhurried patience of someone who has been selling water at that gate for long enough that it no longer requires her full attention. Amara stood beside her car for a moment. She thought. Chitty would have known what to say. She got in and she drove. She drove past the company first. Not because she had planned to, the route home did not pass the company building. But she found herself on that road anyway, the specific autopilot of a person whose body understands where the mind needs to go before the mind has finished deciding. She slowed when she reached it. 12 floors, the name on the glass at the top in letters that caught the afternoon light. Osei Holdings. Chitty had built the first 4 floors. She had built the rest. 8 years of building after he was gone. 8 years of early mornings and late evenings and the specific, unglamorous discipline of someone who is holding something together with both hands and cannot afford to let go. The company was doing well. This was the thing she had always been able to say. Even in the difficult years, the year the market contracted, the year they lost the Abuja contract, the year 2 of her senior directors resigned within a month of each other and she had to rebuild the leadership structure from the inside. Even in those years she had been able to say, the company is doing well. Not performing, not surviving. Doing well. There was a difference and she knew it and it had taken everything she had to maintain it. She sat outside the building for a moment. She thought, Emmanuel is ready. Her managing director, 40, precise, loyal, the specific quality of someone who had been trained by watching her for 5 years and had learned the right things. If something happened, she could trust Emmanuel with the company. She had known this for 2 years. She had not known, until 40 minutes ago, that the knowing would matter this soon. She drove home. The house was quiet in the way that houses are quiet at 3 in the afternoon when the children are at school and the staff are going about the specific, ongoing work of maintaining a large home. The gateman opened the gate with the particular nod he always gave her. Something warmer than deference. The nod of a man who has been at a gate long enough to consider himself part of what the gate guards. She went to Chitty's study. She had kept it exactly as he left it. This was not grief, or it was not only grief. It was also the specific, practical understanding that some rooms should be preserved because what is in them is more valuable than what could replace them. His books were where he had left them. His reading glasses were on the desk beside the lamp he had bought at a market in Accra the year they were first married and had insisted on carrying back on the plane himself because he did not trust it to be checked in. The photograph of the 2 of them at Zara's naming ceremony was on the shelf where it had always been. She sat in his chair. She said, Chitty. She said, I need you to tell me what to do. The room was quiet the way rooms are quiet when they are full of someone who is no longer there. She sat for a long time. The children came home at 4:30. Zara first. 12, the specific self-possessed quality of a child who has grown up watching a woman manage large things alone and has been absorbing the lesson without knowing she was being taught it. She came in and dropped her bag at the door the way she always did and kicked her shoes toward the rack rather than placing them on it, the way she had been asked to 300 times, and then looked at her mother's face and stopped. She said, Mama, are you okay? Amara said, I am fine. How was school? Zara looked at her for another moment. The specific, calibrated look of a 12-year-old who has learned to read her mother's face with some accuracy and is currently not entirely satisfied with what she is reading. Then she picked up her shoes and placed them properly on the rack and said, "It was fine. Mrs. Adeyemi gave us an essay." Kofi came in behind her, 8, the middle child, the one who had Chitty's eyes and Chitty's quality of paying attention to things without appearing to. He said hello to his mother and went directly to the kitchen because he was always hungry after school, and the cook, Mrs. Beatrice, who had been with them for 6 years and who Amara trusted more than she trusted most people, would have something ready. Ada came last, carried in by the driver because she had fallen asleep in the car, the specific deep sleep of a 5-year-old who has used everything available to her during the school day and has nothing left. The driver, Sunday, who had driven for the family for 7 years and who referred to all 3 children as his children in the specific, unembarrassed way of someone who means it, carried her to her room, and Amara watched him do this and thought, these people who are here every day, what do they know about what is coming? Nothing yet. She had not told anyone yet. She told Daniel first. Not that evening. She needed one full night with it before she could say it out loud to someone who would ask the right questions. She sat with it through dinner, through the children's homework, through Ada's bath and Kofi's argument about whether he had to read before bed and Zara's quiet, competent preparation of her school bag for the next morning. Through all of this she carried it by herself, the way she had been carrying difficult things since Chitty died, which was alone and without announcement. The next morning she called Daniel. He came to the house at 9, before she went to the office, before the day properly started. Daniel Adeyemi had been her husband's lawyer before he was hers, had been part of their lives for long enough that he knew where the kitchen was and made himself coffee without asking. He was 45, the specific composed quality of a man who has spent 20 years in rooms where difficult things are decided and has learned to be steady when the room is not. He was also her friend, the kind of friend who tells you when you are wrong and does not soften it and is therefore worth more than 10 people who only tell you what you want to hear. She told him while he was still making coffee. He put the cup down. He said, "When did you find out?" She said, "Yesterday morning." He said, "And you waited until now to call me?" She said, "I needed one night." He said, "How long?" She told him. He received this the way she had received it, without performance, with the full, direct quality of someone taking in something real. He picked up the cup again. He drank. He put it down. He said, "What do you need from me?" This was why Daniel was valuable. Not the law, not the professional competence, though both were real and both had saved her on several occasions. What was valuable was the question. Not, "I am so sorry." Not, "Are you sure?" The question, "What do you need from me?" The understanding that she was a person who always knew what she needed and that the most useful thing available was to ask and then to do it. She said, "I need to think about the children." He said, "Yes." She said, "I need to know what happens to them. Not legally, I know the legal answer, you will manage the estate and the trust and all of it. I need to know what actually happens to them. When I am gone, who is in that house? Who is feeding them? Who is speaking to them correctly?" Daniel was quiet. She said, "I have given Gozi everything she has asked for since her divorce. I have given Emeka and Linda everything they have asked for. I give Bizi money for her business every time she runs short. Same for Chioma. I have been giving since Chitty died and I have not stopped and I do not regret it, but what I do not know is what any of them will do when there is nothing left to give. When the giving is finished. When I am gone and there is only my children left in that house." Daniel said, "Amara." She said, "I know what you are going to say." He said, "I am going to say that your family loves you." She said, "Yes, and I believe they do. But loving me and loving my children are not always the same thing. And I need to know which one is true before I go." Daniel drank his coffee. He said, "What are you thinking?" She told him. He said no immediately. This was expected. Daniel was a lawyer and the plan was not legal in the ways that lawyers care about, and he said so, directly, specifically, with the particular precision of someone listing the reasons a thing cannot be done rather than the reasons it should not be. She listened. When he finished she said, "I know." He said, "Amara, what you are describing involves a fraudulent death certificate and a deception of your children and—" She said, "I know, Daniel. I know all of it." She said, "But I am dying. And I have 3 children who are 5 and 8 and 12. And I need to know." He said nothing for a while. She said, "Help me or don't help me. But I am doing this either way." He looked at her. He said, "You went to Sola first." She said, "Sola understood the human part. I needed the human part agreed before I came to you with the legal part." He said, "And what did Sola say?" She said she would help. Daniel stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there for a while looking at the garden where Ada's toys were still scattered from the weekend. The specific domestic evidence of children living their ordinary lives in a house that was about to be asked to hold something extraordinary. He turned around. He said, "I need you to understand that this is the most legally complicated thing I have ever agreed to do." She said, "Does that mean you are agreeing?" He said, "It means I am telling you the cost so you understand what you are asking." She said, "I understand the cost." He said, "All right." He sat back down. He picked up his coffee. He said, "Tell me the full plan." The plan was careful because Amara was a careful person. She had not become one through temperament alone. She had become one through the specific, ongoing requirement of running a company and raising 3 children and managing the large, complicated machinery of a family that had always leaned on her. Careful was not the same as slow. Careful meant that every decision she made had been thought through from multiple directions before it was made, and that the thinking was done privately, and that what was visible to the world was only the decision, clean, committed, already complete. The plan had 5 elements. First, the medical staging. Her doctor, a man who had been treating her for 11 years and who she trusted with the specific, rare quality of trust that is earned rather than given, agreed to manage the documentation with the specific understanding that it was a private matter and that Daniel was handling the legal structure. What was produced was not a public record. It was enough to satisfy the immediate requirements of the situation. Second, the house cameras. They had been installed 3 years ago for security after a neighborhood incident, and they covered every room except the bedrooms and the bathrooms. 12 cameras in total. The feed went to an app on her phone and could be accessed from anywhere. Nobody in the house thought about them anymore. They had become part of the furniture, part of the background, the specific invisibility of something that has been present long enough to stop being noticed. Third, the children. This was the element that had cost her the most to decide. She could not tell them. She had sat with this for 2 full nights before accepting it. She could not tell Zara, who was 12 and who she trusted more than she trusted most adults, because Zara could not carry a secret of this size without it showing, and if it showed, everything failed. The children would be told she had gone on a business trip. A long one, an important one, the kind that sometimes kept her away for weeks. It was not entirely without precedent. It was still a lie she would have to live with, and she had decided to live with it because the alternative, her children not knowing who would protect them, was worse. Fourth, the house 3 streets away. Sola had found it. A quiet, decent place, not large, the specific anonymity of a rented property in a neighborhood where nobody knew her face. She would live there with Sola for the duration. She would watch from there. Fifth, Daniel, who would manage everything, the estate, the formal notifications, the conversations with Ngozi and Emeka and the others that were required when someone dies. Daniel, who had agreed to all of this at a cost to himself that she had not underestimated and was grateful for in the specific, deep way that she was grateful for very few things. She packed 2 bags. She said goodbye to the house in the way she always said goodbye to it when she was traveling. A walk through each room, a hand on a doorframe here and there, the specific domestic ritual of a woman who loves her house and has always known it. She stood outside Ada's room for a long time. She left before the children came home from school. Sunday drove her to the new house and drove back without speaking, which was the correct thing to do because Sunday was a man who understood when silence was the right language. Sola was already there, had set up the space with the specific, practical warmth of someone who understood that the next several weeks needed to be survivable and had made the room as survivable as possible. There was food. There was a proper desk. There was a monitor connected to the house camera feed. Amara sat down in front of the monitor. She looked at her house from the inside. She could see the kitchen where Mrs. Beatrice was beginning to prepare the children's after-school food. She could see the sitting room where Zara's school bag was already on the floor by the door because some things do not change regardless of what is happening in the larger world. She could see Chitty's study, empty and still. She sat there until the children came home. She watched Sunday carry Ada in from the car, the same thing he did every day. She watched Kofi go directly to the kitchen. She watched Zara drop her bag and then pick it up again and put it properly away, the specific small discipline of a child becoming gradually more like the person she was going to be. She watched all of this from 3 streets away, and she pressed her hand flat against the monitor screen and she said nothing. Ngozi arrived at 2 in the afternoon on the day after. Not the morning. Amara had half expected the morning, the specific urgency of a grieving sister who could not wait, who needed to be in the house where her sister had lived because the house was where the grief was most real. But it was 2 in the afternoon, and when Ngozi's car came through the gate, it came with luggage. Not an overnight bag. Not the modest, single piece of someone who was coming to stay for a few days to help with the children. 3 suitcases and a box and 2 of her teenage children. Her son Tabena, 17, who carried the box with the specific casual ownership of someone entering a place he has already decided belongs to him, and her daughter Temi, 15, who walked through the front door and looked around the sitting room with the slow, assessing quality of someone taking inventory. Amara watched this from the monitor. She watched Ngozi embrace the 3 children Zara, Kofi, Ada with the full performance of a bereaved aunt, which was real enough in its components but assembled in a way that was slightly too deliberate. The embrace held slightly too long for the children's comfort, the tears produced at the right moment. She watched Ngozi walk through the sitting room and into the dining room and then into the kitchen where Mrs. Beatrice was preparing dinner, and she watched Ngozi open the refrigerator and examine its contents with the specific, proprietary quality of someone who has just decided that the kitchen is now hers to manage. Mrs. Beatrice said nothing. She closed the refrigerator and went back to the stove. Amara watched this and understood that Mrs. Beatrice had made a calculation, that the most useful thing she could do for the children was to remain in the house and to manage whatever came, which meant not engaging with Ngozi in a way that would give Ngozi a reason to remove her. Mrs. Beatrice was, as she had always been, the most intelligent person in the room. Emeka came that evening. He came alone. Linda had sent her condolences through a phone call that Ngozi took and relayed with the specific, neutral quality of someone transmitting a message they have chosen not to editorialize. Emeka himself arrived at 7, and when he came through the door, he looked like a man who had been hit by something large and had not yet recovered his balance. He sat down on the sofa and Zara came and sat beside him without being asked because Zara always knew where she was needed, and Emeka put his arm around her and looked at the ceiling for a long time. He did not assess the refrigerator. He did not walk through rooms. He sat with the children and he was present with them in the specific, unperforming way of genuine grief, and when Ada climbed into his lap and fell asleep there, he did not move for 40 minutes because he did not want to disturb her. Amara watched this from 3 streets away. She was sitting at the desk with a cup of tea that had gone cold and she was watching her brother hold her daughter and she was crying in the quiet, specific way she cried when she was alone, which was without sound, only the tears themselves, because she had long ago trained herself not to make the sound because the sound alarmed the children. She said, "Chitty, look at your brother." Sola put a hand on her shoulder and said nothing because nothing was what was needed. Bizi did not come. Not the first day. Not the third. Not the end of the first week. Amara had her phone, had a number that nobody knew that she had purchased specifically for this period, and she used it to track what she could from the outside. She knew that Bizi had received the notification of her death because Daniel had sent it personally. She knew Bizi had read it because Daniel had confirmation. She knew nothing else because Bizi had not called the house, had not sent flowers, had not come to sit with the children, had not done any of the things that a woman who has eaten at your table and borrowed money for her business on 5 separate occasions might be expected to do when you are gone. On the 8th day Sola said, "Maybe she is struggling herself." Amara said, "Yes, maybe." She said it in the tone of a woman who has decided to leave a door open for a charitable interpretation while privately acknowledging that the door is mostly closed. Chioma came on the 4th day. She came in the afternoon when the children were at school. They had been sent back to school because Ngozi had decided, correctly, that routine was important for children, though Amara noted that Ngozi had reached this conclusion on the same day that keeping the children at home would have required Ngozi to manage them personally. Chioma came in and embraced Ngozi with the warmth of 2 women who have found themselves unexpectedly aligned, and they sat in the sitting room together, and Amara turned up the audio on the camera feed and listened. Chioma said, "What did she leave? In terms of, the estate?" Ngozi said, "Daniel is managing everything. It is all in trust for the children." Chioma said, "All of it?" Ngozi said, That is what he says. A pause. Chioma said, and the company? Ngozi said, Emmanuel is running it. Amara had set everything up properly. You know how she was, everything organized, everything in its place. Chioma said, yes. Another pause. Longer. Chioma said, I just thought. She always said we were like sisters to her. The three of us. I thought perhaps she might have. She stopped. Ngozi said, I thought the same. But Daniel says the documents are clear. Amara sat very still in front of the monitor. She thought Chioma, who I lent money to 3 times, who came to my house on the 4th day not to see my children but to find out what I left you. She did not cry for this one. She was past crying for Chioma. What she felt instead was the specific, cold clarity of a person who has just received the last piece of information they needed to complete an accurate picture. The first week produced a pattern. Ngozi managed the house the way she managed everything, loudly, with the performance of someone doing an enormous amount when the actual work was being done by other people. Mrs. Beatrice cooked. Sunday drove the children. The housekeeper, a quiet woman named Agnes who had been with the family for 4 years, cleaned and organized and checked on the children with the specific, maternal instinct of someone who had decided that the children's well-being was her personal responsibility regardless of what she was being paid to do. The gateman, whose name was Femi and who had worked the gate for 9 years, had taken to giving Kofi a brief nod each morning when he left for school. Not conversation, just the nod. The small, consistent acknowledgement of a man who understood that continuity was its own form of comfort. Tebena, Ngozi's 17-year-old son, had established himself in the guest room that was furthest from the children's rooms and closest to the good television. He came down for meals and otherwise made the house feel smaller in the way that teenage boys who are not your children make a house feel smaller. He spoke to Kofi on the 3rd day. Amara caught it on the camera in the corridor, caught the specific quality of the exchange, the way Tebena stood, the way Kofi's shoulders changed during the conversation. She could not hear all of it. She could hear enough. She rewound the footage and watched it again. She watched Kofi's face. Then she called Daniel. She said, I need you to watch the corridor camera footage from today. 3:17 in the afternoon. He watched it. He called her back and said, I see it. She said, yes. He said, what do you want to do? She said, nothing yet. I am watching. He said, Amara? She said, I am watching, Daniel. Let me finish watching. Ngozi's daughter Temi had found the jewelry. Amara could not see inside the bedroom. There was no camera there. She had never wanted one. But on the 6th day, the corridor camera showed Temi leaving for school in the morning, and something caught the light at her neck. Amara leaned forward. She paused the feed. She looked at what Temi was wearing. It was the necklace, the gold one with the small blue stone. Temi was wearing it to school. Amara watched this and was very still. She thought, that necklace. Chitty bought it for her 30th birthday at a small shop in Accra that he spent 3 hours finding because he had seen something like it in a photograph years before and had remembered it. He brought it home in his jacket pocket wrapped in tissue paper and presented it at dinner in front of everyone because he was the kind of man who believed that gifts should be given with witnesses. She pressed her hand flat against the monitor screen. She did not call Daniel this time. She sat with it alone, which was the correct thing to do, because if she called Daniel while she was feeling what she was currently feeling, she would say something that would end the plan prematurely, and she needed the plan to continue. She sat with it until the feeling became something she could carry rather than something that was carrying her. Then she went back to watching. Ada was looking for something. This was visible in the footage across several days. The 5-year-old moving through the house with the specific, searching quality of a small child who has lost something and cannot articulate what it is. She would come downstairs in the morning and stand in the kitchen doorway looking at the room before coming in, as if she was checking for something that was not there. She would go to her mother's bedroom, Ngozi's bedroom now, and stand in the doorway. She never went in. She stood there and then turned around and went back to wherever she had come from. On the 5th evening, she found Sunday in the garage. Sunday was doing what he did in the evenings when the driving was done, maintenance, the small ongoing work of keeping the car in the condition it needed to be in. Ada came in and stood beside him and said, Sunday, where is Mama? Sunday said, she went on a trip, my dear. She will come back. Ada said, when? Sunday said, soon. Business trips are important. She has to finish her work. Ada said, I want to call her. Sunday said, your Auntie Ngozi has her number. You can ask her to call. Ada said nothing for a moment. Then she said, Sunday, do you miss Mama? Sunday put down what he was holding. He looked at Ada. He said, every day. Ada nodded. She said, me too. She turned around and went back into the house. Amara was watching this on the monitor. She was not crying quietly this time. Sola came and sat beside her and held her hand, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Emeka came back on the 7th day. He came in the morning before work with his 2 children, a boy of 8 named Chukwu and a girl of 5 named Ifeoma, and he said to Ngozi that he was going to drop them at school with Zara and Kofi and Ada, and then he wanted to have a conversation. The conversation happened in the sitting room. Amara turned up the audio and leaned forward. Emeka said, I came last night after you had gone to bed, and I walked around the house, and I want to know who is responsible for the children eating dinner. Ngozi said, I made sure they had dinner. Emeka said, Agnes told me the children had been eating late every day this week, that they had been asking for food at times when food was not ready. Ngozi said, I am managing a whole house, Emeka, with my own children here as well. I cannot be expected to. Emeka said, Amara's children should not be asking for food in their own house. The room was quiet. Ngozi said, I am doing my best. Emeka said, I know you are. I am telling you that the best needs to be better. Because these are not just children. These are Amara's children. And if Amara trusted us with them, then we need to be worthy of that trust. Ngozi said nothing. Emeka said, I am going to come every evening this week. I will eat dinner with them. And if the dinner is not ready when I arrive, I will take them to my house. He left. Ngozi sat in the sitting room for a while after he left. Then she went to the kitchen and spoke to Mrs. Beatrice about the dinner schedule. Amara watched this and thought, Emeka, my brother, who I always knew, who is being exactly who I always knew him to be. She rewound the footage of Emeka's conversation and watched it 3 times. The second week brought the question of the school fees. Zara's school fees for the next term were due. Daniel managed this from the estate. It was straightforward and expected, and he paid them without issue. But Ngozi, who did not know that Daniel had already handled it, called him on a Wednesday afternoon and said she needed money for the children's school fees and for the house expenses and for her own children's school fees because of course they were also living in the house now and their needs were also real. Daniel called Amara after. He said, she included her own children's school fees. Amara said, yes, I heard. I had the call recorded through the house line. A pause. He said, what do you want me to do? She said, pay the children's fees. Decline the rest. He said, she will not be happy. She said, no. She said, Daniel, how much have I given Ngozi over the past 4 years? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said the number. She said, yes. She said, and she is in my house with my children eating my food, and she has included her own children's school fees in my estate expenses. She said, decline the rest. He declined. Ngozi called him back twice that afternoon, and he did not pick up on the advice of his own professional judgment. That evening Ngozi was in a bad mood in the way that people are in a bad mood when they are in the wrong and know it but cannot acknowledge knowing it. She was short with Mrs. Beatrice. She was short with Agnes. She was not short with Emeka, who arrived for dinner as promised and who she treated with the careful, slightly tense quality of someone managing a person who has already demonstrated that they will not stay quiet. Dinner was ready when Emeka arrived. The children ate properly. Amara watched and noted both of these things. Linda came on the 9th day. She came with Emeka, who had not known she was coming and who Amara could see was surprised to find her in the car when he went to his gate that morning. Linda came in wearing a black dress that was expensive and fitted with the specific, composed quality of a woman who has thought about what she is wearing to a house of grief and has made choices accordingly. She embraced Ngozi. She looked around the sitting room with the same slow quality of assessment that Tebena had displayed on the first day, though Linda's version was more practiced, more subtle. Amara did not see what happened in the bedroom, but Agnes told her later, in the plain way Agnes told her everything she thought Amara should know. Linda had found the jewelry case. It had been moved from the dressing table to a shelf in the wardrobe. Agnes had done this on the third day, a quiet protective gesture that Amara had noticed and been grateful for. Linda found it anyway because Linda was the specific kind of woman who finds things she is looking for. She opened it. She looked at the contents. She did not take anything. She closed it and left the room. Later, in the kitchen, when she thought nobody was nearby, she said to Ngozi, "The jewelry is still here." Ngozi said, "I know. I have not touched it. It belongs to the children." A pause. Linda said, "Strictly speaking, it belongs to the estate." Ngozi said nothing. Linda said, "I am just saying. There are things here that are not specifically accounted for. That could reasonably be." Ngozi said, "Linda, not now." Linda said, "I am just saying." She said it again. Just saying. The specific language of someone establishing a position they intend to return to. Emeka appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked at his wife. He said, "What are you just saying, Linda?" The kitchen was quiet. Linda said, "I was just talking to Ngozi." Emeka said, "I heard what you were saying." Linda said, "Emeka," he said, "we are not doing this. Not in this house. Not now and not ever." Linda said, "I was only," he said, "I know what you were only, and I am telling you that we are not doing it." He left the kitchen. Linda stood for a moment. Then she straightened her dress and followed him. That was the 9th day. By the 12th day, Linda had moved out of their house. Emeka told Ngozi this on a Thursday evening while the children were doing homework. His voice low and level, not performing the pain of it but not hiding it either. He said, "She said there was nothing for her here without Amara's support. He said it the way you say a true thing that has cost you something to hear but that you are not surprised by." Ngozi said, "Emeka, I am sorry." He said, "Don't be." He said, "I have known for a long time. I just did not want to know." He sat with the children until they finished their homework. He drove home to a house that was quieter than it had been in 8 years of marriage. Amara watched this from 3 streets away and she thought, Linda, who took my wigs and my jewelry and said thank you every time, who performed gratitude the way she performed everything, with the conviction of someone who has practiced it but not the warmth of someone who has felt it. "I am sorry, Emeka. I am sorry it took this to show you." The 3rd week was the hardest. Not because anything dramatic happened, the dramatic things had already happened, had been absorbed, had been filed into the growing record of what the camera was showing her. The 3rd week was hard because of the small things. The accumulation of small things. The specific, ongoing weight of watching your children live without you from 3 streets away and being unable to do anything except watch. Kofi had stopped eating lunch at school. Agnes mentioned this to Sunday in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning, not knowing that the kitchen camera was running, not thinking about it. She said, "Sunday. The school called yesterday. Kofi has not been eating his lunch. The teacher says he sits at the table and just looks at his food." Sunday said, "I will talk to him this evening." Agnes said, "It has been happening since the 1st week." Sunday said, "I know." He said it the way a man says something he already knows and has been carrying. Amara called Daniel that afternoon. She said, "How much longer do I need?" He said, "What have you seen that you have not already seen?" She said, "Nothing. I have seen everything. I have seen enough." He said, "Then tell me when." She said, "1 more week. I want 1 more week." He said, "Why?" She said, "Because I want to see if Ngozi changes. I want to give her the full time. I want to know that what I saw was the pattern and not the exception." He was quiet. She said, "And I want to see Emeka 1 more time. Through the camera. Before I see him in person. I want to see him 1 more time being who he is when he does not know I am watching." Daniel said, "All right. 1 more week." Emeka came on Thursday evening with his 2 children. He came the way he always came now, after work, consistently, the specific reliability of someone who has made a decision about what his evenings are for and is not negotiating it. His children Chukwu and Ifeoma came with him, and they played with Ada in the sitting room while Emeka sat with Kofi at the dining table and helped him with his mathematics homework. Not performatively, there was no audience for it. Ngozi was upstairs, Mrs. Beatrice was in the kitchen. There was nobody to perform for. He sat with Kofi and worked through the problems at Kofi's pace, and when Kofi got something right, Emeka said, "Yes, that is exactly right, well done," in the specific, unhurried tone of someone who is not in a hurry to finish and go somewhere else. At one point Kofi looked up from his book and said, "Uncle Emeka, do you think Mama is coming back soon?" Emeka put his pencil down. He said, "Yes. I think she is working very hard and she will come back as soon as she can." Kofi said, "I had a dream that she came back and she was standing in the kitchen making tea like she always does in the morning. She always makes tea in the morning before anyone else is awake." Emeka said, "I know. She has done that since she was a little girl. Even before your father, she would wake up early and make tea and sit in the quiet by herself." Kofi said, "I did not know that." Emeka said, "There is a lot you do not know yet. She will tell you herself when she comes back." Kofi looked at his book for a moment. Then he said, "Uncle Emeka, I am glad you come every day." Emeka said, "I am glad too." He picked up his pencil. They went back to the mathematics. Amara was watching this on the monitor at the desk in the house 3 streets away, and she was not pressing her hand against the screen this time. She was sitting with her hands in her lap and her eyes closed and the tears coming in the specific, quiet way she had trained them to come, without sound, just the tears themselves, and she was saying in her mind, "Chitty, look at your brother. Look at him with your son." Sola came in and saw her and said nothing and went back out. Some moments are for one person only. On the Friday of the 3rd week, Zara did something that Amara had not expected. Zara came home from school at the usual time and put her bag away properly as she always did and went upstairs. She did not go to her own room. She went to her mother's room, which was Ngozi's room now, and she knocked on the door and she went in. The bedroom had no camera, but the corridor camera outside had audio, and the door was not fully closed, and Amara turned up the audio on the corridor feed and leaned forward. Zara said, "Auntie Ngozi, I want to ask you something." Ngozi said, "Yes, what is it?" Zara said, "Temi has been wearing my mother's necklace to school. The gold one with the small blue stone. It was a gift from my father." Ngozi was quiet. Zara said, "I would like it back, please." Ngozi said, "Temi." She said it upstairs, called her daughter. Temi came in. Ngozi said, "Give Zara back the necklace." Temi said, "I was just wearing it. I was not keeping it." Ngozi said, "Give it back." There was a pause. Then the sound of the necklace being removed and handed over. Zara said, "Thank you." She left. Amara watched her 12-year-old daughter walk down the corridor to her own room. She watched Zara close the door behind her. She thought, "You knew. You knew it was wrong and you went and asked for it directly and you said thank you when you received it. 12 years old. Where did you learn that?" She knew where she had learned it. The same place she had learned everything else. From watching. The 3rd week ended and Amara had what she needed. She called Daniel on the Sunday evening. She said, "I am ready." He said, "How do you want to do it?" She said, "I want to call them to a meeting. Formal one. In your office. I want them to come thinking it is about the estate. I want Ngozi and Emeka both there. I want Bizi and Chioma both there. And I want to walk in." He said, "And the children?" She said, "Sunday will bring them to Sola's sister's house for the afternoon. They will not know what is happening. Not until after I have spoken to the family." He said, "And after?" She said, "After. I will go home." A pause. He said, "Amara." She said, "Yes." He said, "How are you?" In terms of how are you, she understood what he was asking. She said, "The same. Not worse. The months are still months. I have time." He said, "All right. I will arrange the meeting for Wednesday." She said, "Thank you, Daniel." She put the phone down. She looked around the room in the house 3 streets away, the modest rented space that had been her world for 3 weeks, the desk, the monitor, the chair where Sola slept some nights rather than going home, the window that faced in the wrong direction to see her own house but that she had looked at anyway, every evening, as if looking in the right direction would change what she was allowed to see. She said, 3 more days. She went to sleep. The meeting was called for 2 in the afternoon. Daniel's office, a serious room in a serious building, the specific quality of a space that has been used for important decisions long enough that the walls seem to know it. He had arranged chairs in a configuration that was neither confrontational nor casual, a round table which was deliberate, because there should be no head of the table for what was about to happen, no implied hierarchy, just people in a room about to receive something. Ngozi arrived first, in her best dress, her manner the specific, composed quality of a woman who has decided that a meeting about her dead sister's estate is an occasion that requires presentation. She sat and crossed her legs and put her handbag on the table with the slight, proprietary ease of someone who considers the money in this room already partly hers. Emeka arrived 3 minutes later, in his work clothes, not having had time to change. He sat beside his sister and said nothing, which was Emeka, the man who said nothing in rooms until he had something worth saying. Beezy arrived looking uncomfortable. She had been called by Daniel and had come because when a lawyer calls about an estate you come, and she had come in the specific, slightly sideways manner of someone who knows they have done something wrong and is hoping it is not the subject of the meeting. Chioma arrived last, 5 minutes late, apologizing in the particular way of someone who is not sorry but understands the social requirement of performing sorry. Daniel said, "Thank you all for coming." He said, "There is a matter related to the estate that requires your presence." He said, "I have asked someone else to join us today." He paused. He said, "She will be here in a moment." Ngozi said, "Who?" The door opened. Amara walked in. The room received this in 4 completely different ways. Ngozi made a sound that was not a word, a sound from somewhere below language, below thought, the specific involuntary noise of someone whose understanding of reality has just been revised without warning. She stood up and then sat down and then stood up again. Emeka stood up and walked directly to his sister and held her and did not speak. He did not make a sound either, not like Ngozi's sound, not involuntary. He was simply silent, which was his way, which had always been his way, which was the way of someone for whom feeling something real does not require announcing it. He held her and she held him, and they stood like that for a long time while the room waited. Beezy had her hand over her mouth. Chioma was very still in a way that was not the stillness of shock but the stillness of a person doing a rapid internal calculation. Daniel sat quietly at the table and let it happen. When Emeka finally released her, Amara sat down. She looked at everyone in the room with the specific, direct quality she had always used when she had something difficult to say and had decided to say it clearly. She said, "I need to explain what happened and why. And then I need to show you something." She told them, not with drama, the diagnosis first, the timeline, the decision. She told them about the plan, the house, the cameras, the 3 weeks. She told them that she had watched everything. She said it plainly, without accusation in her voice, in the specific tone of someone making a factual account. Then she opened Daniel's laptop and she showed them the footage. Not all of it. She had selected the pieces carefully, the same way she made every decision, with the understanding that what you choose to show is as important as what you choose to say. She showed them Ngozi arriving with the suitcases and assessing the refrigerator while Mrs. Beatrice turned back to the stove. She showed them Temi wearing the necklace. She showed them Chioma on the 4th day asking about the estate. She showed them Beezy's absence, not footage because absence does not appear on camera, but the record of what had not happened. She did not show them to Benna and Kofi. She had decided not to. That was a conversation she would have with Ngozi privately, specifically, away from the children and away from the group. She showed them Emeka at the dining table with Kofi doing mathematics homework. She showed them Emeka's face while Kofi said, "I am glad you come every day." She showed this not as contrast, not to shame anyone by comparison, but because it was part of the accurate picture and the accurate picture was what she had come to give. When the footage ended, the room was quiet. Ngozi was crying. Not the performed tears of the first day in the house. Something rawer than that, the specific, undignified quality of genuine shame, which is different from grief and different from regret and is the most uncomfortable of all of them. Chioma was looking at the table. Beezy had not looked up from her hands since the footage began. Emeka was looking at his sister with the specific, complicated expression of a man who loves someone and has just watched them be smaller than he hoped. Amara said, "I want to speak to each of you." She looked at Ngozi first. She said, "You are my elder sister. For most of my life you have been one of the most important people in it. I have given you what I gave you because I love you and because when someone you love needs something and you have the ability to provide it, you provide it. I do not regret a single thing I gave you." She paused. "But what I watched in my house, the way my children were managed, the way the house was run, the way you saw my things and your first instinct was what belongs to me now. I need you to hear that I saw it. All of it." She said, "I am not removing you from my children's lives. They need their family. But the terms of what that looks like are going to change. And those terms will be documented and they will be managed by Daniel. Are we clear?" Ngozi said, "Amara, I am so sorry. I did not know what I was doing. I did not think." Amara said, "I know you did not think. That is part of what I needed to see." She looked at Chioma. She said, "You came to my house on the 4th day after my death to ask about the estate." She said it without anger, flatly, factually. She said, "I want you to sit with that. I will not tell you what it means about you because I think you already know." She said, "I have given your business money on 3 separate occasions. I will not be giving it again. Not because I am punishing you. Because the giving was built on a friendship that I have now seen the inside of, and what I saw does not support the continuation of that kind of giving." Chioma did not look up. She looked at Bizi. She said, "You did not come." Bizi said, "Amara, She said, "I am not asking for an explanation. I am telling you that I know." She said, "Of everything I saw and did not see over these 3 weeks, your absence was the thing I spent the most time with. Because I have been to your house when you were sick. I have sat with you. I have given you money for your business when the business was failing and when it was not failing." She said, "And when I died, when you believed I had died, you did not come." She said, "I do not know what to do with that yet. But I know it. And knowing it changes things." Bizi was crying. Amara said nothing more to her. There was nothing more to say. She looked at Emeka. She said, "I owe you an apology." Emeka looked up. She said, "I deceived you. You grieved for me genuinely and I watched you grieve from 3 streets away because I needed to know something and I chose to find out this way." She said, "I am sorry for that. I mean it without qualification." She said, "What I saw you do for my children during these 3 weeks, I will carry that for the rest of the time I have." She said, "When I am gone and I will be gone, the children will be in your care. Not Ngozi's, yours. Daniel will document this. You will have the support of the estate to do it properly. Your children and my children will grow up together." She said, "I am trusting you with the most important thing I have. I want you to know that I am doing it not because you are family, because of who you are." Emeka said nothing. He nodded once. That was enough. She went home that evening. Sunday drove her. Sunday, who had known since the beginning because Sunday always knew, the specific, observant intelligence of a man who has driven a family for 7 years and understands everything that moves through a house. He did not say anything when he picked her up from Daniel's office. He drove. When they pulled into the gate, he stopped the car and he said, "Welcome home, Ma." She said, "Thank you, Sunday." She went inside. Mrs. Beatrice was in the kitchen. She turned when she heard the door and she looked at Amara and she put down what she was holding and she pressed both hands together in front of her face in the specific gesture of someone receiving something they had been hoping for without knowing they were allowed to hope. She said, "Madam." She said it twice, just the word, twice. Amara said, "I am back." Agnes came from the corridor and stopped when she saw her and made the same sound Ngozi had made, the prelinguistic sound, the one below words, except on Agnes it sounded different because what produced it was different. She went to the children. They were at Sola's sister's house. Daniel had arranged for them to be brought back after the meeting. She arrived there at 6 in the evening and when Ada saw her she did the thing that 5-year-olds do, which requires no description because anyone who has seen it knows exactly what it is and anyone who has not seen it cannot be told in words. She simply ran. And Amara caught her and held her and Ada said, "Mama, mama, mama," in the specific, repetitive quality of a child for whom one saying of a thing is not enough. It needs to be said until the reality of it is fully established. Kofi stood a little back and waited his turn with the specific, patient quality of an 8-year-old who is feeling the largest thing he has felt in 3 weeks and is managing it in the composed, watchful way he managed everything, the way he had got from his father. When she held him, he was very still. He said, "You were gone a long time." She said, "I know. I am sorry." He said, "I kept your tea mug on the kitchen counter, so it would be ready." She held him tighter. Zara was last. Zara, who was 12 and who had asked for the necklace back directly and politely and said thank you when she received it. Zara looked at her mother for a long time before she came forward, with the specific, searching quality of someone checking something they need to verify before they allow themselves to believe it. Then she came and she said nothing, which was the right thing, because some homecomings do not need language. There is something this story wants to say before it closes. Amara Osei gave everything she had to the people she loved for most of her adult life. She gave without condition and without keeping score and without expecting anything in return except the ordinary reciprocity of being loved by the people you love. This is not a character flaw. This is one of the most generous qualities a person can have, and it produced real good in the lives of real people, and it should not be recast as weakness simply because some of those people were not equal to it. But here is what the story also knows. Generosity without discernment is not a virtue. It is a habit, and habits, unlike virtues, do not require the other person to be worthy. A habit continues regardless of what it is feeding. Amara had been generous to Ngozi for years, and Ngozi had taken the generosity and had not been changed by it into someone more generous. She had been changed by it into someone who expected it. There is a difference between those two things, and Amara had needed 3 weeks in a rented house with a camera feed to see it clearly. This is not a story about bad people. Ngozi was not a bad person. She was a person who had been given so much for so long that she had confused what was given with what was hers. Chioma was not a bad person. She was a person who had learned to see Amara's resources as available and had stopped being able to see the person the resources belonged to. Linda was not a bad person. She was a person who had married into a situation she had not valued until it was removed. Beezy was not a bad person. She was a person who did not know how to show up when showing up offered nothing in return. These are not the same as being bad. But they are not the same as being safe. And when your children are 5 and 8 and 12 and you have months to decide who will love them after you, safe is the only thing that matters. Emeka was safe. Amara had always known this. She had paid a very high price. The grief of her children, the grief of her brother, 3 weeks of watching from behind a screen, to confirm what she already knew. This is the specific, terrible arithmetic of needing to be certain when certainty costs something. She needed to be certain. She paid the cost. She is certain now. There is a question this story leaves you with. Think about the people in your life who receive your generosity. Not the people who thank you for it. Thanking is easy. The people who receive it. And ask yourself honestly. If the giving stopped tomorrow, if you were gone and there was nothing left to give, who among them would show up for the people you love? Not who would say they would. Who actually would? Because the distance between those two answers is where Amara spent 3 weeks. And what she found on one side of that distance. A brother who came every evening. A driver who told a 5-year-old he missed her mother every day. A cook who made sure the children ate. A housekeeper who moved the jewelry to a higher shelf was enough. It was more than enough. It was, in the end, everything.